everyone, good evening. I'm Mary Beth Popnewski. I am the Program and Director for SCAN. Thank you for joining us for the third part of our series with Dr. Goldberg about palliative and hospice care. And we're so happy tonight to have a panel with us this evening. So I'm going to have Dr. Goldberg just introduce her guest this evening, and then they in turn will introduce themselves. So I will turn it over to you, Dr. Goldberg.
Excellent. Well, welcome everyone back to our third and final session. I'm really honored to have two of the members of my hospice team from VNA here to join us. I think they'll add a huge value into our discussion. We've been very technical up until this point for the last two, and now really look toward our specialists who are going to help with both the spiritual and emotional side of making these kind of decisions. So very proud to introduce Reverend Mario Lavender Sr. and Marina Snead, who's our social worker. They'll introduce themselves and give you a little bit about them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Goldberg. Hi, everyone. My name is Marina. I am a social worker here at VNA Monmouth County. And I'm very excited to share with you some of the information and education we have about choosing care.
Hi, everyone. This is Reverend Mario Lavender. I go by Chaplain Mario for visiting nurses. I'm the senior chaplain for the Holmdel office in Monmouth County, and it's an honor and a privilege to be here tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so let's begin. So what is hospice? So hospice care is a service that is aimed to provide comfort care when curative measures are no longer an option. To qualify for hospice, a doctor must certify that there is a terminal illness and life expectancy is 6 months or less. Now, I'd like to talk about that and a little bit later on in the presentation, because I think that when we hear 6 months or less, that starts to, it feels very set in stone and it feels very permanent. So we're just going to kind of unravel that a little bit more later. Hospice care is there to provide people who are terminally ill live comfortably with dignity at home. There is a designated and specifically trained team of professionals and caregivers to help manage the pain and guide you and your family in coping. There are many services that they're not even listed here on the slide. I'm not sure if everyone can see it, but the services include nursing care, respite care, home health aid, medication, supplies and equipment, chaplain services, social work services, and many other forms of soothing therapies. Hospice is covered by Medicare, and it's also covered by most other insurances. We're there to provide caregivers as well as the patients and yourself emotional and spiritual support. And through this process, or through this journey, as here in hospice care, we'd like to call it your end of life journey, we find our meaning and our purpose, and we find hope.
The goals of hospice care. Focus on your needs of comfort to support the highest quality of life, following your wishes and your advanced directives, which we will talk about, caring for the whole person rather than just the disease, which is vitally important, and guiding you and your family through the expectations of the disease progression, giving spiritual care and emotional counseling, including grief assessment and support. These are just some of the things, that are set in goals. And in nursing care, providing relief for your symptoms and also making sure you're comfortable. And I always like to say, living to the very end, and allowing for you and your family to find solace, grief, and embrace time together. What to ask before this conversation? What to ask before the conversation? So I'll cover yourself. Some things we should be asking, and we just put a few points here just to start conversation. When you're in the hospital and having difficulty speaking for yourself, who is it that you would like to bring, that you will feel relief at your bedside? You know, that is vitally important. And we know that sometimes these discussions are not always easy, but I'll share with you, it's so important to choose the right person that you would like to have there. Also, would this person be able to communicate with your doctor and coordinate your care plan, have your best interests? Also, do you think this person would agree with you, would agree with your end of life decisions? That is vital. Unfortunately, I've been in this, you know, unfortunately, I've seen situations where someone didn't choose the right person. And unfortunately, they actually went through a longer process, you know, and a lot of things that they desired wasn't done. And that's not even pertaining to hospice. It was just someone making a decision for them when I worked in long-term care. And understanding that they didn't choose the right person, and when this person got very ill, you know, they actually was in a vegetable state, you know, and that's not what they desired to do, to live in that place. And so that is so important, picking the right person and making your decisions. And also, what would be difficult for them to accept? That's so vital, you know, and having the right person choose and making your decisions.
Absolutely, Mario. You definitely touched on a lot of questions and concerns that run through our minds when we're thinking about ourselves, and what our long-term planning is, right? And where we see ourselves. But there is another side to this, right? The side of the caregiver and the family member, where you notice that your loved one is not as strong, or you see that there's a serious illness that they're dealing with. So now you start to think about things, right? For example, do I know what my loved one, my mom, my dad, my husband, my spouse, right, might want, or am I just giving this my very best guess? Did you sit down and did you talk about what do you want for yourself? You know, when you're faced with a serious illness, or are you just kind of guessing because here and there we might have mentioned it, right? What are some challenges that you might encounter as a caregiver? I think that's important to think about things like, you know, decisions that need to be made, taking time off of work to care for your loved one. And then it goes into a little bit more of, have you done this before? If you're a caregiver and you've done this before, whether it's for, you know, your in-laws, or maybe a friend or another family member, if you have done this before, are you prepared to do this again? And can you do it again, right? Especially when someone is thinking about you to be their healthcare proxy or the person to make decisions. I think it's important to know if you're ready to do this again. And I think most importantly is, do you feel that you have all the support that you need to get through this? Do you have people to talk to that might share similar experiences? But most importantly, is there someone that's very well versed and understands end of life, that can get you through this and talk to you. So, so I'd like to talk a little bit about the 5 wishes. This is a form of an advance directive that we use quite often in hospice care. And it kind of goes over, has some statements that go over what you want and what you might want your family to know. So there's a quote that starts off the document, right? And the quote reads, "There are many things in life that are out of our hands. This 5 wishes document gives you a way to control something very important, how you are treated if you get seriously ill." Now, we call the 5 wishes the living will with a heart and soul, right? You didn't just go there and have an attorney draft it up for you. You sat down and you gave it some very thoughtful, you gave it some thought, right? And you spoke to someone about this. It's a document that's created for patients and for their families to plan ahead when you're coping with a serious illness, or when you face a serious illness. Your family would not have to guess what you want, and they don't have to make hard choices without knowing what your wishes are. And as a caregiver, it helps you better understand what your loved ones really want. And when you're in that situation, like in the emergency room or just in the hospital, at a nursing facility, or even at home, and you're faced with that, serious question of, well, what should we do? What other options? There might not be any other options available. What should we do? You could at least go back and refer to this advance directive or this conversation that you've had with your loved one before. And what these 5 wishes are, just to state what they are, it asks the person I want to make care decisions for me when I can't, the kind of medical treatments I want or I don't want, how comfortable I want to be, how I want people to treat me, and what I want my loved ones to know. So these 5 wishes are already common questions and concerns that we think about day to day. And something that we talked about in the last slide too, like, who do you want to be there for you, right? Or how comfortable you want to be. What do you want people to know, right? So very important questions, and I think it gets down to really the details, and it gets down to the bottom of what we want for ourselves.
I'm just going to add one thing about it. What's nice about the 5 wishes is that it's not a pre-written text like you see in a lot of the forms that you see both with yourself and with your lawyer. It's very open-ended questions. There are options to circle. So it has a very comfortable, approachable aspect to be able to really identify what's important to you. So it's a very nice tool to be able to use. Sorry.
No, thank you, Dr. Goldberg. Yes, absolutely. So these are kind of some of the statements that you see in the 5 wishes, right? So this is my wish for how comfortable I want to be. I do not want to be in pain. I want my doctor to give me enough medication to relieve my pain, even if that means I will be drowsy or sleep more than I would otherwise. Very important, right? And this just kind of helps us understand what comfort care at home looks like too, right? We go on to, and again, you could circle what you want or cross out what you don't want. So then we have, if I show signs of depression, anxiety, nausea, shortness of breath, or hallucinations, I want my caregiver to do whatever they can to help me. I wish to have personal care and incontinence care performed as long as it does not cause me pain and discomfort. I wish to connect with my spiritual side or religious community to bring me peace. And you could also add in what are other ways you wish to be comfortable? Maybe there's something that the document, didn't think of, and, you want to put in what's very important to you. How do you want to be comfortable at home and manage any discomfort? And here we have, which I think is another piece that's very important. The last slide we talked about how we want to be kept comfortable, but this slide kind of talks, and this wish talks a bit more about what you want loved ones to know. When we begin to have the conversation about a serious illness and what kind of treatment we want and we don't want, some of the things that we miss is that awkward, uncomfortable conversations where you're kind of faced with death and dying. So maybe what you want to tell your loved ones are that you love them, and maybe you're proud of them, and maybe you want to ask for forgiveness or forgive other people. It helps you kind of open the conversation too and say that, you might not agree with some of my decisions, but I ask that you respect them. And I want us to be together and through this time, and have your family or your faith community be by your side and come and pray with you. Or maybe you want people to visit or not visit. Who do you want to include in this part of your journey? And so I ask, what else would you want your loved ones to know, and how do you want to be treated?
I can share a story. I had a patient who had cancer who had filled one of these out. And one of the things that she wrote is that she said that if I lose my hair, I'm okay with that. I don't want to be embarrassed if I have a bald head. I mean, it could be just as simple as that, because that's what made her feel normal again, right? Is that she didn't have to hide behind putting a wrap on or putting a wig on. She could just be herself, knowing that that is part of her now, whether that was what she hoped for or not. But it was important for her to let her family know that. So it could be anything really that really is important to you.
Definitely. And that's a great example. And it actually reminds me of a lot about the same scenarios that at the home that we hear too, right? As you'll hear people say, listen, my cat or my dog means everything to me. I want to make sure that they have a good home, or I want to make sure that someone is going to care for them. So it's what is important to you, and what other people need to know, what matters.
Yeah, that's so important.
Okay. So this is a question that Mario and I, and Dr. Goldberg would like to ask to everyone who's participating today. When you hear the word hospice, what concerns come to mind?
So we can ask everyone to put that in the chat, or I'm going to remove the spotlight so we can kind of see if anyone wants to turn their video camera on. You can feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to answer the question. What comes to mind when you hear the word hospice? Well, I'll answer that question. And Dr. Goldberg knows this because we talked about it many a times. I think it's a word that scared a lot of people, which is why we brought this program to SCAN. It's a scary word.
Yeah. That hospice is a scary word, you're saying? Right. It is. And we'll talk a little bit about that too. We actually want to address that with everyone. There's a lot of misconceptions and stigma around hospice and the term.
Right.
So I think it is important that we start the conversation early and we change the idea or the myths about what hospice is.
And we have in the chat, dignity and comfort at the end of life comes to mind when this person heard the word hospice.
Right.
Excellent. We have a positive spin on what hospice is about, right? Usually when you talk about that fear, people, think of all the worst things about hospice. And I think if those of you who have been in the other lectures with me understand that if we don't truly understand what hospice is, that's kind of where some of these misunderstandings and fears come out of, because a lot of fears, not only about the word hospice, but in general about, your health, usually come about, I find, when people don't really understand what the doctors are telling them, or they're not even having discussions. So not understanding it, I think, causes this huge role of anxiety, because you're kind of filling in the gaps yourself if someone's not helping you through that.
And there was another positive comment that I will receive the best care possible at this time of my life.
That's great. That's a great perspective. That's someone that's benefiting from being educated concerning hospice.
Absolutely. When we think about all of those things, we want to be treated with dignity and respect. We want to make sure that our wishes are going to be honored, right? Especially if we're filling out the 5 wishes, that everyone understands what it is that you want, and that your doctors and your care team also understand what is comfortable for you. Yeah. So we've kind of compiled a little bit of some of these hospice myths that we hear, and we hear this all the time. One of the myths that we hear is hospice expedites death. So let's just talk about this for a bit. So the hospice benefit, like we started in the beginning, it's intended for people who are likely to pass away in the next 6 months from complications of their illness. What we do here in hospice is we always look to see if someone remains appropriate for our program and for the hospice care. Sometimes you might see people remain on hospice for quite a while, or just people remain on hospice on the program. There are too many people tend to choose hospice closer to the end of the disease progression. And so they're unable to experience the full program potential. And what we mean by that is sometimes people come on very late in their disease progression. And so they might stay on service for a week or 2 weeks. And families kind of tend to feel that, they came on hospice and it expedited their death because of some of the services or some of the medication that were provided. When in fact, it's really that the disease has progressed and it's terminal. It's at the end, you're at the end of the disease progression, and any support that we provided, that was all comfort care. Those were all forms of comfort care, including the medication. Again, there's people, just to reiterate, people die from the disease and the shutdown of the major functioning organs. And hospice manages the symptoms that emerge from this natural progression to ease the discomfort, such as pain, difficulty breathing, or anxiety. Some people do remain on hospice for more than 6 months, as every condition is unique and we cannot exactly predict when we will die.
And also,
sorry, Mario.
I'm sorry. No, so also too, we have to remember, because there is certain things that qualify them to be on hospice. And there are many cases where we discharge people off of hospice because they don't fit the criteria, and the fact that they are getting better. Sometimes that happens too. So, but they did benefit through the process of being on hospice. And, you know, we were able to be there and they were able to get the full potential of the program at the time. But sometimes people do come off of hospice too, as well.
Yeah.
I was just going to reiterate some of the benefits that people don't get. You know, we all met this morning. We had our by every other week hospice meeting where we review all the cases of the patients that are on our service, on our team. And, you know, when people come on for a day or two, or even 3, right? There's so much that goes on in the beginning of a hospice admission that there are unfortunately times when those patients and their families can't meet the social worker or the chaplain because it's just too fast before they could actually get out to the home to meet with the families. And there's such a lost opportunity there, right? In hospice, we do follow up with those patients for bereavement risk anyway. But, you know, you all know when you are getting a phone call versus actually sitting down with someone next to you, looking in your eyes, having a personal conversation, it's very, very different. And I always feel how it's a missed opportunity for those patients that they didn't get to meet the wonderful staff that is really out to help them. And so I do believe that when we wait too long, those are the things, not only the symptom management and the meds, but just the emotional support that we can provide for both the patient and their family.
Absolutely. Actually, one of the things as a hospice social worker, what we assess is bereavement risk. And there's many different triggers that we look for. But we do that so that we can have a better understanding of what's going on within the family, right? Sometimes it might not be someone who's directly involved that has a higher chance or risk of not coping so well. And we want to be there. We want to be available and provide tools and resources, whether it is to the person who is having a difficult time grieving, but also to the family that is now kind of taking on this new role to support someone who's having a hard time. For example, grandchildren, right? If you have grandchildren that are old enough to understand what dying is, but not old enough to understand what happened, what's going on, can we have done something more, or just missing your grandparents and how life changes, right? So we want to be available for that and provide resources and tools.
And Dr. Goldberg and Marina, you both make great points. And I just want to say, I was just thinking the fact that the points you made, Dr. Goldberg, and that even when it's short, unfortunately, that we still follow up. And what's beautiful about that and that bereavement assessment and risk understanding with the grandchildren, there's times that I make a phone call to a family member and when I offer condolences and support, never met the patient. And after that phone call, we realized there are young children that we didn't know were involved, and we asked how they're doing. And, so they're able to get support as well, and that's what I love about the team effort, is the fact that they could speak to me and it could be someone else on the team, and that their discipline would come in, like Marina, and I would call her and she would let me know. And likewise, if there's a spiritual need and they say, hey, this person, is taking a little hard, I think they can benefit from a chaplain visit or a phone call. And those are the great benefits of being on our services.
And I just want to add in too, Mario, a lot of the times you hear social worker or chaplain and you automatically want nothing to do with a social worker or a chaplain, right? And believe me, I'm with you, right? But in hospice, we're clinically trained. We're trained differently to make assessments and to provide support. So in social work, I'm looking a lot at grief and coping with grief and dealing with grief. I'm also looking at what other services might I be able to provide to you, right? Whether it's finding a caregiver, right? You can't do it all on your own and finding a caregiver, but also tapping into the hospice services that are available and using them, like a respite care when you need a break. And for chaplain services, I know, Mario, you're going to talk about it, but when we hear chaplain, we hear that's it, this is the end. But again, our chaplains are just trained differently, right? There's a whole course that you have to take, right, in order to be a hospice chaplain.
Absolutely. And many times, even when someone potentially declines pastoral care, I still follow them and still make myself available, because many times through their journey, they will come to understand that they need the support. And then also knowing if they have a clinically trained chaplain, I'm able to address some things that even your local pastor who has been to seminary, and I'm a pastor too, and have been to seminary, and we have different training we go through and theological training and things. It was total different training that I received as a chaplain in clinical education, and understanding that I'm able to provide a different need and support. I always say it's more than just prayer, and so it's very beneficial. The sooner you get on our services, the more you'll be able to benefit from the whole program. So that leads us right into myth number 2. And we hear this often. Do not use the word hospice. Many family members ask that we do not use the word hospice around their loved one. We will certainly honor their requests, but this is a hard promise. It really is. And many times we hear that, which is very difficult. And it does come because of misconceptions and lack of education about hospice. It becomes part of an anxiety that's created around the word. And that's why we ask that question early on. What comes to mind when you think of the word hospice? Now, everyone that's on this Zoom and anyone who will be able to listen to what we're saying and learn from this, I'm sure it would help them to understand more of the services that's provided, and it would help them to not have that anxiety when the word hospice is mentioned. And it's important to start the conversation early. Start it early, and prior to a terminal illness, and all the things that we said even earlier, thinking about who, you would like to have over your work, the things that you would like to have done over your, advance directive and your living will and those things, having those things in place. And even sometimes now with this education, you'll be able to educate them and tell them, because they may feel different about hospice. When you mention it to them, you say, no, I know that I'm going to receive, as someone said, dignity and comfort. I know that I'm going to, receive support, and not only me, but also there'll be support for you as my spouse or caregiver or my children, so those things, you won't have that anxiety when the word hospice is mentioned.
And I just want to give a short example. I've had a patient on for cancer, and we were very alert. They can tell you that they have cancer, but the family asked that we don't use the word hospice because they felt that, it'll feel like it's too devastating, right? That there's nothing else to live for. And then we kind of talked a little bit more about it and asked the patient, what it is that you want, what are your wishes. And it kind of just so naturally came out that, well, I don't want any more treatment. I mean, I've done everything that I can. I just want to be home. I want to be around my family. I want to eat. I want to eat good food, and spend time with the people that I love. I don't want to go back to the hospital or the doctor's office. I have to wait there too long anyway. So it kind of just naturally ended up coming out. They were saying it without actually saying it, that they want hospice.
Mm.
So you're right. It's kind of changing the idea of what hospice entails, and maybe people have heard, that certain things about hospice, right? That brought on some misconceptions.
Yeah.
And I saw someone mention quality. What was that? Quality over
Quantity.
Yes. Thank you.
And Marina and Reverend Mary, we do have a question. I don't know if you want to take it now about addressing the timeline for conditions and determining when someone has dementia or Alzheimer's. Do you want to wait till the end, or?
Yeah, I think we should we'll go through the slides and we could remind me and I could address it.
Okay.
Well, if I go on hospice, that means
I think that was me, Mario, right?
Right.
Sorry, I'll take this one. If I go on hospice, that means I have given up hope.
Right.
And hope can mean many different things at many different stages in our lives. When we're battling a chronic illness, we hope to get better with treatment. When we have accepted that a chronic illness is in fact terminal, hope can be viewed as living for the moment and focusing on what you wish to include in your end-of-life journey. Hope is what's left to give quality of life meaning. We want to embrace the ability to engage in your interests and hobbies, and allows your family and caregivers to reflect, grieve, and discover what their own meaning of hope and purpose is.
And
Always.
go ahead, Mario. You had something.
No, go ahead, Dr. Goldberg.
Oh, no, I was gonna say, I hear this a lot. People, oh, my loved one was a fighter. It always was a fighter. And what I always say to that is, choosing to come onto hospice doesn't mean that you're not fighting. You're just fighting a different battle, right? You're choosing a different outcome. You're looking to fight for something else. You're choosing to fight for comfort. You're choosing to fight to be home. You're choosing to fight to get to a family event, right? Whatever that is, it may not be fighting for a cure for your disease, but that doesn't mean that you're not fighting, and I say to people all the time that sometimes choosing this choice is actually, in my mind, more brave than any other, right? Because it's an easy thing. You go to the hospital and you go to the doctor and they'll offer you treatment. And sometimes that doesn't necessarily make sense for you. And I feel that it's a very brave and courageous decision to say, you know what, I'm just done. And I really just want to focus on different things in my life.
Now, I totally agree with you, Dr. Goldberg. And I believe that hope is also taking control, and that's exactly what that brave statement of taking control, and making that decision to say, you know what, I'm still a fighter, like you said, but I feel that I have to take control, and that alone gives a person hope to continue to live to the end. So that brings us to our next myth. Hospice does not align with my religious or spiritual beliefs. Try to answer, what kind of spiritual or religious care do you need at end of life? And we can answer that at the end. You are not required to sign a DNR, do not resuscitate, to be eligible for hospice. Review your advance directives together with family, your doctor, and religious leaders to understand what life-sustaining measures are available and are important to you. A DNR means that you want natural death when it is your time. And this is so important. You know, I'm a hospice chaplain now, but I was also working at the hospital in chaplaincy at Robert Wood Johnson at one time, and being part of the trauma team and seeing when someone codes and the trauma that the body suffers in that moment. And being part of the trauma team as a chaplain, I'm there to comfort the family. Many family members would be outside of that hospital room that I would have to comfort as they witness these measures being taken to save their loved one's life. Now, many times it was necessary because there was still an opportunity to bring them back to life. And in some cases, it wasn't. They just did not sign the do not resuscitate, which is a choice. But I always explain to families, when it comes up and they ask me as a religious leader, how do I feel about it? I always let them know it's a lot of trauma to your body. There's a lot of things that you're going to go through. And sometimes it's not always necessary when your family is going to go through that as well. And as a religious leader, I allow them to know, the choice is yours, but if really you really want to think about the DNR. And hospice offers pastoral care. It's a non-denominational spiritual trained counselor like myself to bridge the gap to help with your relationship with God, but not limited to religion, equipped to provide an emotional support and counseling during your end of life journey. And I think that's so important because it's not always religious, it's not always spiritual. I provide a lot of emotional support and counseling to the family and the loved ones in the process, helping them through their journey. And many times just sitting with them in their pain and listening to what's necessary to help them through their journey.
No, I tell the story, and I'll do brief because we're going to get close to time. I tell the story to every hospice nurse that I train. I do a training for every nurse and staff member who's doing orientation about pain management. And it was about a young gentleman who was on our hospice team who was visibly in pain, but refused pain meds every single time we would go into their house. And with time, actually, it was the chaplain who was able to really identify the why he was doing it. In the end, it was his spiritual beliefs, because he felt that, he wasn't a very nice person in this world, and he was looking to suffer to be able to make it to whatever his beliefs were in the next world. And it became this really traumatic time for him, not only because he was spiritually in trouble, because physically he wasn't getting control of his pain because he was forcing himself to suffer. So it goes in so many ways of how that spiritual pain and the spiritual support is really so important.
Beautiful.
Okay, so the next slide is a video, a little bit of an introduction of a project that was working on to help people have these conversations with their loved ones.
Welcome back. Our next report here is one of those things a lot of American families should see, because it's about a moment in life all families face. Tonight, you'll see something remarkable going on at a hospital in Wisconsin that has developed a humane and life-affirming way to face what we all eventually face, and that is the end of life. Just as remarkable, as you'll see, are the families who allowed Harry Smith to join them in the conversation.
People come to the emergency room to have their lives saved. Resuscitation complete? Good. But as Americans live longer and longer, the emergency room is not the best place to begin a conversation about how you want to live the rest of your life, or even how you want to die. You know where you are? Tough choices about which treatments and how much treatment become a guessing game, often powered by guilt. Palliative care specialist Carrie Lappin.
One family member may say, no, we need to do this. We have to do everything. And another family member that is saying, we just have to make her comfortable.
But that disagreement rarely happens in what might just be the best place to die in America, La Crosse, Wisconsin, home to Gunderson Lutheran Hospital. Here, an astounding 96% of the patients have a game plan for life and death. It's called an advance directive. It starts with a very tough very honest meeting they call Next Steps.
Tell me what you know about Paul's condition. He's not going to get better. And we know that. Paul, what do you hope for with your current plan of care?
Give me as much time as I can get, but keep me comfortable.
Paul and Jean Pearson have been married 21 years, a second marriage for both. Together, they have 6 children. He's a 73-year-old retired architect. She was an interior designer. This is what real love and devotion looks like.
If you were having a good day, what would that day be like?
I'd probably be fishing,
You'd be fishing.
and she'd be with me. She's more important to me than anything.
Paul Pearson has inoperable lung cancer. He and Jean don't want there to be any doubt about how he wants to live out the rest of his life.
This discussion.
So in this meeting, run by Jackie Cartman, a nurse practitioner, Paul and Jean faced their decisions and fears head on. We were there to witness the process, which is as emotional as it is profound.
Paul, what worries you about your illness? What fears do you have?
Breathing is going to be a problem, and probably having to go to the nursing home.
And what about going to a nursing home?
It's being I don't want to be a burden to her.
Paul is emphatic. He doesn't want to linger or suffer, and he is not afraid to say so by refusing treatment.
What I'm going to do now is read through these situations. If I have a serious complication from my cancer or treatment for my cancer, so that I was facing a prolonged hospital stay and my chance of living through the complication was low. For example, only 5 out of 100 patients would live.
I would deny treatment.
It was expected that I would never either walk or talk or both, and I would require 24-hour nursing care.
And it'd be the same answer.
It was expected that I would never know who I was or who I was with.
Same thing.
And I'm in agreement with.
Looking ahead to the end of life is a journey that takes no small amount of courage. And what happens in this meeting is as important for Jean as it is for Paul.
Can the Father please say him doing? This is really a gift that you're giving to your family, because at some point, if they're needing to make a decision, they can go back to this and say, yes, this is hard, this is difficult, but this is what mom or this is what dad really wanted.
One of the things they've learned here is all this talking about how you want to die, in many cases, helps people live longer and, incredibly enough, cost less. At Gunderson, patients in the last 6 months of life spent half as many days in the hospital as the national average. Bud Hammis has a PhD in philosophy from Notre Dame. He led the Gunderson team that came up with this better way to die.
When we talk with patients who are getting sicker over time, and they tell us, I've reached a point where I know there isn't much more, I'd like you to keep me comfortable. The cost of care goes down because we're not taking them back to the hospital and doing all these expensive things they don't want.
Some people will see this, though, and say, it looks like they're trying to talk people out of care.
That's not the philosophy. We really want to understand the patient's perspective. We want to understand the patient's values.
Okay.
And planning ahead has another benefit: peace. When it's time to go, there is little rancor or remorse.
Hello, Eva.
While we were at Gunderson, we met the Foot family. Just the week before, 94-year-old Eva Foot was at a local fair.
I know that what you wanted for her is for her to be comfortable.
But severe stomach pain brought her to the emergency room. Eva had a life-threatening blood clot in her intestine. The Foots, like so many others here, had an advance directive, which meant they had a roadmap which led them to forego surgery because as doctors found Eva's chances of regaining anything close to her former health were next to none. Your parents let you know ahead of time what they wanted to do.
Yes. Knowing ahead of time, it takes a load off the family.
2 days later, Eva passed away peacefully, her wishes honored. For Paul Pearson's children, the plan was tough to take at first. Now that they know what he wants, they have accepted it.
You know, it does put everybody at ease.
To know that there is this plan in place.
Yeah, it really does. All of us can be prepared for each step as it comes.
The Pearsons don't feel like victims of their circumstances. In fact, just the opposite. The process has helped Paul decide how he wants to live the rest of his life. On the schedule, more fishing and historical reenactments. Jean and Paul have been going for years, and now is not the time to stop. How helpful is it to have these conversations, to go through the scenarios ahead of time?
This gives us that advantage that we don't have to be second guessing. What should I do? We've already made those decisions. And they're hard decisions. But we're okay with them.
Our thanks to Harry Smith, but also to Paul and Jean Pearson, who we happen to know are watching our broadcast at home tonight. They allowed us to join in their life-changing conversation. Thank you on our behalf for sharing your bravery. We're back with more right after this.
Okay, so I've seen this video, I can't even tell you how many times, and I still cry at every single time I watch it.
Yeah, that was a wonderful video, and I think it really summarized and showed a lot of those talking points that we brought up earlier. I think one of the things that stuck out to me, the Pearsons, when we talked earlier about it's okay to sign on earlier, right? So you could really benefit from hospice and the services that are available and still have a quality of life, right? You can do civil work just for reenactments. You can spend time with family and friends. And then there was the elderly woman who the advanced directives were talked about, but she was not on service beforehand. But the family still knew exactly what she would have wanted, although it is very hard to make those decisions, right? The decision is always going to be hard. It's a hard choice, but you know what your loved one wants. So kind of we come right back to starting the conversation. So there's many different ways to start the conversation. One of the ways that we, tend to go with is, ask a family member, or remember when Mario asked, who would you be relieved, that person is by your side. That person, your healthcare proxy, maybe to join you at your next doctor visit. Gives you an opportunity to, take the load off of you and even have your doctor maybe explain what's going on. Tell them that you're ready to talk about your care when you no longer want treatment or you've explored all other options. Ask them just to be a part of your advanced directive planning, like the 5 wishes. Tell them how you're feeling lately, right? Maybe you haven't been feeling so well. Maybe you've noticed that you're not really eating a lot. You have a loss of appetite, you're tired, and, maybe you're noticing that I need some more help. I can't really do this on my own. So talk to your loved ones, talk to your family members, so you can have them start to understand that you're looking for help and you would like to start planning ahead. And for caregivers, if you're noticing, right, a decline or something is coming up, it's hard to say, hey, what's going on here? Why are you not, not feeling well, right? So we could approach this differently, and we can say that, I know that this is difficult to talk about, but I want you to know that I really care about you and I love you. And I just want to understand what's going on. What are your wishes in case anything was to happen? I just want to know. And although it's an uncomfortable conversation to have, it is something that once you start, you can't stop. Or another way you can start the conversation is tell them that you attended the scan series, whether all 3 parts or just this part or another part, to start talking about bringing awareness to hospice care. Maybe talk about some of the myths that you've heard today and say, hey, you know what? I actually heard otherwise. And kind of start giving them some tools and resources and information too. And our takeaway here is, we really want for you to consider hospice as an early intervention in the disease progression to keep you comfortable. Hospice is all about comfort and comfort care. So start asking yourself, what are your wishes? And begin or revisit your advance directive. And imagine the form of comfort that you want, and what does comfort look like for you in your end of life journey. Hospice provides comfort care. There are misconceptions of hospice care that prevent us from really taking advantage of the full services. And as a hospice team, we are here to provide emotional, spiritual support to you and your family, including bereavement and grief counseling as well.
So in terms of, we're just about out of time, but I just wanted to remind you, so the 5 wishes that we talked about tonight is legally a living will once it's signed. So it can serve as a role for your living will and your healthcare proxy to identify a specific person that Mario talked about, identifying someone who you feel comfortable, who would make decisions for you. But also there's just they're all different products on the internet to have other things besides the 5 wishes. And we talked also in the past about a post, which is a form that you would sign with your doctor that would formalize what you wanted in a physician order that can then be acted upon should you come to a hospital environment. And so that's all our information for tonight. We really hope that you enjoyed it. And I think there was one, we're so happy that you joined us, and hopefully you could spread the word to your friends and your family members who were not at these series. I know that they're taping them, so they'll be available for them to watch if they couldn't make it in the night events. But please spread the word. As you see, education and knowledge is the best part of this whole thing. So we're so happy to have had this.
So yeah, there was.
Thank you to Mario and Marina for joining me and giving such wonderful information to the members of SCAN.